Barris off of you a thought. C to the H to the O to the T. We call Barris off, yeah. C to the H to the O. Hello boyos, Rich Boy J here back with another video, and today we have another episode of Your Questions Answered. You guys know the drill. If you want to see one of your questions answered below, make sure it's Lego Star Wars, or pretty much anything else related, and check back next week to see if you made the cut. I also want to give a very special thanks to Jedi Bob once again for going ham on the intro. I loved it. Great job, man. I am still accepting custom intros. If you guys want to see literally any creative thing you come up with that's somewhat relevant to the channel that you want to put at the beginning of one of these videos, do it. The first question comes from Chris O. Flynn. He says, any plans to do a Cloud City Mach? As such an iconic original trilogy location, I think I've only seen one large-scale Mach of it, whereas other OT locations seem to have been made as a Mach by every man and their dog at this point. It's my favorite Star Wars location, and I'd love to see it. This is a great question. I really thought, here's my thought process. I think we haven't seen as many Cloud City Machs, especially with it being as iconic as it is, just because of the figures. That original Cloud City set was so expensive, and many people just literally didn't have all those characters in the Cloud City setting to do that Mach. So I think initially that probably prevented a lot of people from even deciding to pursue that Mach. Now that we had the Betrayal in Cloud City set released, which I guess at this point is retired, and I haven't checked the prices on those figures. I would imagine they're certainly cheaper than the ones we got in that original set, but there are still some exclusive figures to that set, like Lando, for example, and that wasn't a cheap set either. So I think the fact that Lego releases so few Cloud City sets is probably a big reason we don't see as many Machs, because the figures aren't as easy to get a hold of. I was relatively confident that after the Betrayal on Cloud City set came out, we would see a massive influx of Cloud City Machs being made, but that still doesn't seem to be the case. I think also, if you think about just the way Cloud City is set up, I think that a lot of the other original trilogy locations are maybe more conducive to a Star Wars Mach. For example, the Death Star, I mean, you can literally do any part of it as just a box, and you can represent certain rooms of it, and it's pretty easy to translate that to Machs. Hoth is just snow and mountains and AT-ATs and snow speeders, many things that Lego has produced, so that's also a pretty straightforward build to do. Even Tatooine, you know, it's just a pretty basic sand landscape. But then you think about Cloud City, and you know, you'd really have to think hard about how you wanted to accomplish a large-scale Mach like that, because you know, part of it's the big platform where the Falcon is, which would already be a massive Mach for anyone try to undertake. It also doesn't help that it's circular. I think that's really a big factor that people might consider and decide, maybe I don't want to build it. Like, you can think about Camino, for example. We don't see a ton of large-scale Camino Machs because a lot of the architecture just isn't super straightforward to build with Lego. So I think there are a variety of factors about Cloud City that maybe prevent a lot of people from attempting it, but I certainly would love to see more large-scale Cloud City Machs. I think that'd be awesome. Next question comes from Grayman5. He says, what is your favorite group of minifigures for one character? Like all the Han Solos, Luke Skywalkers, which character has had the best minifig lineup? This is actually a funny question because I kind of addressed this in the most recent minifig wall. I was talking about how I think the Farm Boy Luke figure specifically, Lego has just always made good versions of it, aside from that one that we don't really talk about. But for the most part, Lego has just done a great job on this figure. I think from the very first one up until now, where they've honestly kind of perfected it. Farm Boy Luke has to be like my favorite character that has the best array of minifigs. If you're just asking for like a character regardless of their specific outfit, but just as a whole, I probably still might have to say Luke Skywalker. It certainly helps that he has so many varying outfits, and at this point we have 2 trilogies, and maybe even 3 trilogies if they ever decide to make a baby Luke minifigure that we can base his character off of. So that's lots of different contexts, lots of different outfits, and I think Luke is just such a lovable character that it's kind of hard to not want to have as many different types of minifigs of him as possible. So I probably got to go with Luke Skywalker. Next question comes from Stormtrooper Lego. He says, do you ever plan on doing Lego stop motions on your YouTube channel again? I really want to get into stop motions again. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I know I've been saying that I've been thinking about it a lot, but it is something that I'm pretty committed to. It's just a matter of finding the time to do it. I think that Starkiller takes up a pretty big portion of my time when it comes to my YouTube channel, as well as just trying to upload daily and keep videos constantly coming out, that it becomes kind of difficult to, you know, do an entire stop motion in between there. Because stop motions are pretty time consuming. I think it's really going to take a pretty big change in my channel for me to try to accommodate that. And I mean, I'd love to know what you guys think about that. Like, if I started doing stop motions on a somewhat regular basis, I would definitely have to cut out some of the more regular videos that I do. Like, some part of the channel would have to be sacrificed to accommodate that. I'm willing to do it. I'm just at this point not really sure what I'd want to sacrifice. So I don't know, it's something that I'd really have to think about, but I assure you I'm very committed to, at some point, starting up stop motions again, because it's just a very fulfilling thing for me, and I think I have some pretty cool stories that I'd like to tell and have unfold in Lego stop motion form. Next question comes from Bricks Over Blocks. He says, how often do you watch Star Wars? This is a good question. I actually don't get this question very often. In terms of actually just watching Star Wars movies all the way through, I might average maybe like 2 movies per month, depending on what I'm working on. I feel like I'm always just pulling up Star Wars movies to like look at certain scenes or look at like reference materials for MOCS, or if I'm just thinking about something Star Wars related and I'm like, does this actually happen? Or like, how did this scene play out? I don't exactly remember it. I'll go back to see just how something unfolded that I probably don't remember so well. But this is a good question for you guys in the comment section. How often do you guys actually watch Star Wars movies all the way through? And which Star Wars movie do you find yourself watching most often? Next question comes from Alex McBrick. He says, what's the best way to cover a Mach? I tried to put a cover on my Takodana, but I keep knocking trees over and the Mach is too tall, so it's hard to cover. I imagine Starkiller's a pain to try to cover up to keep the desk off. So what would be the best way to do that? I want to be totally honest with you. I've never covered a Mach up. Like, I just don't. I would rather just like wipe the desk down when it gets to that point than try to cover it. It's really just because I work on the MOCs. I pretty much am building the Mach throughout the time it's up, and then when I'm done, I take it apart. I don't keep large scale MOCs just sitting around where I need to cover them. So like Starkiller is, you know, it's taking a while to build, obviously, but I'm constantly adding to it. So I don't know, for me, it just doesn't really make sense to try to cover it up and uncover it. I don't know, maybe I might, you know, prevent a decent amount of dust that way, but I don't know, like you said, like MOCs can be fragile, like to try to do that, and especially with a large Mach like Starkiller, where just the stage area alone is the size of like a couch, like trying to cover that up, I can only imagine how difficult that might get. So I've never been at a point to cover up MOCs. Does anyone in the comment section do that often? What do you guys do for that? Next question comes from the Jawa Lord. He says, are there any minor/secondary Star Wars characters you really like? For example, Tarkin, Wedge, Lobo, etc. I'm a huge fan of Admiral Piet and General Veers, despite them having such little screen time in the films. This is a good question because I think it really depends on what you consider a secondary Star Wars character to be. I think if we think minor, then I'd probably put that on the level of like Tarkin, Wedge, people who we know the names of and they have lines, but they're not, you know, they don't have a ton of screen time. But I think when I think of secondary characters, I think of like people right below the main cast. So for the original trilogy, I might say like Obi-Wan and Yoda are both secondary characters. Like they're still definitely at the forefront and they have a decent amount of screen time, but I still put them a level below the main cast, Luke, Han, and Leia. They're certainly more important characters than Tarkin and Wedge, but I still differentiate between those two levels. So when it comes to secondary characters, I think I'm going to go with Yoda. Like, Yoda is just incredible in the original trilogy. And even in the sequels, like, Last Jedi Yoda is just perfect. Like, I would not change anything about that scene and his interaction with Luke. Like, that was just one of the most meaningful Star Wars moments to me, and that's part of the reason I love The Last Jedi so much. Snoke, the Emperor, and Lando are also up there for me, just great Star Wars characters, and a level below them, I would probably say DJ from The Last Jedi. I really did like his character. Next question comes from Sarah Valentine Bode. They say, Rich Boy J, what Mach would you make if you wanted to build big but on a budget? This is an interesting question. Like, what Mach could you build large scale? But basically, what is the cheapest Mach you could do at a large scale? And I think it would have to boil down to just the simplest landscape, because when you're building large scale, the landscape is the bulk of what you're building. So what has the simplest landscape? The first thing that comes to my mind would be the Battle of Naboo. Like, if you could just get a bunch of green base plates, like you'd be pretty fine on the landscape for that battle. You'd still have to get a lot of the sets. And a lot of the Gungan like wildlife they use in that battle, I guess, would be a little complicated to put together, but compare that to maybe some of the more complex landscapes like Endor with giant trees. I think the Battle of Naboo would probably be the cheapest Mach you could build on a budget. Hoth is probably up there too. Like if you wanted to get white base plates, get an AT-AT set, maybe 2 of them, Snowspeeder set, and then you're good. The final question for today comes from Starboys. He says, what is your opinion on third-party products for LEGO, be it services like Clone Army Customs or Brick Arms? How do you decide what to purchase? I sometimes feel super purist when it comes to those third-party sites and have a hard time breaking off from the norm. I can relate to that to an extent. I think ultimately I'm probably I would prefer to have the LEGO version of something. If it's something that LEGO doesn't make or their version just isn't great, I actually don't have a huge problem nowadays with going with third-party sites like Firestar, for example. I love that they add detail to a minifig's arms. Like that's something that LEGO could do, and it's in line with like the LEGO design aesthetic. It doesn't look out of place, but it's something we don't get super often with Star Wars figures, so I would not hesitate at all to go with them. When it comes to the custom weapons, I really feel the same way. Like I have no issue using custom LEGO weapons. Once again, they fit with the LEGO design aesthetic. They're just more accurate, so I don't have a problem using those. I think with Clone Army Customs, like I think that can be where I draw the line, just because a lot of their helmet molds aren't like the LEGO versions of the helmet molds. So for example, if I was doing, you know, a mock with a bunch of clones, but I needed some like named clone commanders, it would be weird having the LEGO versions of the clones and then the Clone Army Customs Phase 2 clone when the helmets just look so different. So I think at that point, I would probably try to avoid that as best as possible. But I think what it boils down for me is if the custom is in line with the LEGO design aesthetic and doesn't look out of place, I'm pretty okay for the most part with using those in builds. And that's going to finish up the video, guys. I appreciate you for tuning in today. Of course, you know, put your questions in the comment section below. They can be related to anything at this point. So I'm really interested to see what you guys might want to know about me, about the channel, about life, about my wisdom. If you guys like what I do, go ahead and support the video by hitting the like button, support the channel by smashing that subscribe button, and I'll be back again very soon.